Well, thank you for that brief introduction.
I told you it's going to be quick.
You did keep it brief. When you speak a little bit, you introduce a whole lot. I'm going to start with a story or two this morning, if that's all right. I was privileged to preach right at 400 times last year. I love to preach. I love the opportunity to teach and talk about God's Word. And so a couple of years ago, I was in Middle Tennessee at one of the churches there. It was on Wednesday evening. I showed up good and early like I try to do, and milling about. My wife was with me. I had my suit on, my Bible with me, my outlines. After I'd been there a while, nobody spoke to me. Literally nobody spoke to me. Church of 300 or 400 folks, and on Wednesday night, I had a suit on. It's pretty obvious, I think, that I was a speaker, but nobody. It was just really cold. I was very disappointed. Finally, this little short guy walked up to me. He said, looked up at me and said, "You the speaker tonight?" I said, "Well, I think so." And he said, "Well, I'm introducing you." I said, "Well, good." He went away. Nobody spoke to me other than him the whole time. Melanie was with me. He got up to introduce me. He asked me to send the bio, so he looked down at the bio, he looked up at me, he looked down at the bio, he looked up at me, he looked at the audience. He said, "I'm supposed to introduce a speaker tonight." Looked down back at the information we'd sent, looked back up at the people, and he said, "But folks, I don't like doing this. Brother Jenkins, come speak to us." You never know. So I was in Canton, Ohio, preaching in a meeting a few years back. When you're in Canton, Ohio, have you ever been to Canton, Ohio before? No, nobody. Well, there's only one thing in Canton, Ohio. You know what it is, don't you? Pro Football Hall of Fame. So if you're in Canton, Ohio, that's what you're going to do. You're going to go see the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So I went to see the Pro Football Hall of Fame on Tuesday, and got there late, got to the service late that night. And that old saying, "They're not going to start with other preachers," is not true. They'd already started. It's a full house. I slid in beside this rather elderly lady and sat down beside her and preached. And then after the service, everybody was being nice. They were leaving, and this little elder lady was just standing beside. And finally, after about everybody cleared out, she came over to me and she said, "I want to thank you." She said, "I've been a widow for over 30 years. And she said, I sit by myself every Sunday and every Wednesday." She said, "Tonight the preacher sat beside me." And I didn't have the heart to tell it was accidental. But from that, I decided I'd start sitting beside someone when I went to speak. Someone was sitting by themselves, and because that's bad to have to sit by yourself. So I started doing that. So I was preaching in Kentucky this past summer, and at the Central Church in one of the cities in Kentucky, which name I cannot remember right now. And Jay Lockhart was introducing me. I waited till the very end. I couldn't find anyone sitting by themselves. There were 3 older ladies sitting together near the front, and I thought, well, there's somebody. So I slid in beside them and asked me to sit there and introduce myself. And they said, "Okay." But Lockhart was introducing me, and he went on and on. He just wouldn't stop with the introduction. It was just really nice. I was enjoying every second of it. Not really. It did take quite a while. Finally, one of the ladies, the one on the furthest from me, the third of these 3 ladies, leaned forward and in a voice that I'm sure was loud enough for everybody in the room to hear, said, "Well, after all that, you better be good." You never know when you're traveling around and being introduced what you're going to get. I want to take a minute this morning as we start and just have you tell who you are and where you're from, because we have several places, I imagine, that are represented this morning, and I thought that would be good for you to kind of know a little bit about each other. So let's start over here. We'll just work our way around, and then we'll come back up to the front and work our way in the back. So go ahead.
I'm Jerry Western. I live in White Bluff, Tennessee, and I work for In Search of the Lord's Way.
I'm Sandra Burford. I attend church here at Adamsville, and I'm glad that we're doing this today.
We are too.
Karen Owens, I'm from the Hartselle congregation.
Skelton. I'm from Adams. Francis Orange, Jack's Orange wife from Sylacauga, Alabama.
I'm Dave Shockley. I'm from Meridianville, Alabama.
I'm Cindy Hayes, I'm from Adamsville. Megan Gilbert from Adamsville.
From Madison Hayes from here.
Kyle Hayes from here.
Here we were here.
Doris Weaver and Taylor Parker, my granddaughter, we're from Adamsville.
Dana Moran from Madison.
Harrison Murray.
Candace Gilbert from Adamsville.
Taylor Griffin from Adamsville. Seth Moore from Adamsville.
Well, I'm glad that all of you are in here. And for those of you that are from Adamsville, we appreciate you taking the lead in this. And I know the crowd is not what you had hoped for, but don't let that bother you. Don't let that discourage you. Some of the greatest things I've ever been privileged to be a part of. There's only been a handful of people that have been involved in them, and good came from them. I believe good will come from this day and what you do. I'm supposed to speak about two different areas in the time that I have. I'm supposed to talk about the Joe Miller videos or film strips, and then I'm going to talk about my dad's book, God Speaks Today. So we'll try to divide our time appropriately, and as Ronnie said in talking to those of us who are presenting, that the goal is not for us to just go in depth in everything that we do with these materials, but to give some pointers, some overviews, and some things that will be helpful. And hopefully we'll be able to do that today. And Gary, you don't have a watch on, do you?
No, but I got
You got
one of your phone.
somebody with a watch on.
Here you go.
If you will, I don't want it. Just let me know when we've got about 5 minutes left, about 15.
What do they say, 20 after?
Yeah, but let me know about 15 after, so I can give it all a few minutes to ask anything you want to. Fair? All right. Now don't cheat on me, okay?
I'm not sleepy yet. You got to worry about that this afternoon.
Okay.
Remember, the reason I didn't tell the war story, first
Yes.
time I met you, your daddy was a young man, and you were a rugrat.
Well, some folks might say it's still kind of that way. So we're going to start with the Joe Miller videos, film strips, CDs, whatever you want to call them. And the thing is that it's a challenge to speak about them because most of you have seen them so very many times. I can remember going on studies with my dad when I was a rugrat, when I was very young. And Dad literally, I would watch him because I didn't watch the film strip. Dad literally would sleep in between beams. You know what I'm talking about? You know, you had that dome, and it was time to turn the film strip. And I was amazed at how he could just get a good little nap between each one, but he was right on top of it. So, sometimes we've seen those things so many times, we forget the usefulness of them. What a great tool these are. Joe Miller was a real person. He and his wife had, I think, 11 children between the ones that were natural born and the ones that they adopted, maybe 12, but I think 11's the number. And I met Brother Miller back in 1991, I believe it was. So, believe it or not, that's been over 20 years ago. And he was holding a workshop for us when I preached at the Hamilton congregation. And I went to the airport in Tupelo, Mississippi to pick him up, to bring him to the workshop. And I knew I would have about 40, 45 minutes to visit with this good man and learn from him a little bit. And so I did what I normally do when I talk to someone. I just started asking questions. And so I said, Brother Miller, tell me, if you will, a little bit about how you got involved. How did these things come about? And his story was one that I will never forget, and I think it may be helpful to you today. He said, I was preaching as a preacher student at Hardy when I was a student. He said they did not have classes on Monday. This was back years and years ago. And he said most of the guys, most of the preacher students would leave on Friday, catch a train somewhere, and then be picked up and be taken to wherever we preach on Sunday, and then Monday we'd travel back on the train, and so we didn't have classes on Monday. And he said, so Monday people would get back, all this Bible majors, all the Bible students, preacher students, I think he said preacher boys, would get back and we'd sit around in the dorm and we'd talk about our weekend. And he said, this one over here, and talked about, man, I had a great weekend. I baptized 7, and some guys said I baptized 10, and some guys said I baptized 3. And he said, I go every time. And he said, every time my report would be, I didn't baptize anybody. He said, I never was able to. And he said, it was very discouraging. He said, I started thinking, I probably shouldn't preach. I probably should find something else to do. And he said, I thought, well, I can't preach very effectively, but I'm pretty good at telling a story. And he said, so I took some notebook paper, and he said, I started drawing pictures of the Bible story. And he said, then I colored them in, and then on the back of each of those sheets of paper, I wrote a little script. And he said, so I would sit down with someone when I met them, and I'd show them the picture, and I would read off the back of it what that picture told about. And he said, I tried to cover the whole Bible and church history, but I tried to keep it brief. And he said that was the beginning of the Joe Little film strips. And I thought, what an amazing story. I mean, here was a guy who thought, I can't teach people. I can't baptize anybody. Now, I don't know who those preacher boys were that were in that dorm every Monday that came back with their little reports of 9 and 10. But I know there have been thousands and tens of thousands of people who have been led to the Lord by the use of Brother Miller's inability to teach them. So I want to start really by saying to you today, don't be discouraged. Don't be discouraged. If it's not going well, if the method that you've chosen is not working very well, don't be discouraged. Just keep on. Keep at it. The second thing I want to say, I've got 9 things in this section. The second thing that I want to tell you today is real simple, and that is to find a method. There are 5 being taught today. If we had the resources to bring them on in, we could have 50 different resources. There are resources all over out there of how to teach someone the gospel. You need to find a method that clicks with you, one that you're comfortable with, one that you, when you finish with it, you understand, you grasp, you get it, and then start using that method. I don't care what method you use to teach someone the gospel. Just teach them the gospel. I personally have enjoyed using the Joe Miller film strips and CDs and videos through the years. Used them a whole lot. But the primary reason I've used them is I'm very, very comfortable with them. Normally now, I don't use the Joe Millers. I stopped using them a few years ago in normal situations. And I now use a method that I've kind of developed on my own. That's just where I walk someone through the plan of salvation and some simple Bible teaching. But that's just what I've gotten comfortable with in the setting that I'm in. But I also know that I use different methods in talking to different sorts of people. Different people can be approached in different ways. And so I would just encourage you to try to find one that you are comfortable with and then use the one that you're comfortable with. The third thing I will mention to you, and these all could be used with any, or not all of these, but several of these can be used with whatever, and that is I want to emphasize to you the importance of consistency. The importance of consistency. And I mean by that, you should do your very best to keep a study going with at least one person all the time. And just don't give up. Don't quit. I probably will tell you more stories about that than some of you want to hear. But Dad taught an awful lot of people, as most of you know. Preached at Woodlawn and Rolla Parkway for 43 years. And he was constantly baptizing someone. And one time I was talking to him about, I had gone through a period of time where I had not had a whole lot of studies. And Dad would always chide us if that happened. He'd get on us, ask every time he talked to us, who we were studying with. Dad said, I said something, he said, are you taking anyone with you when you go on studies? And I said, well, sometimes, but it's hard to get people to go. And he said, I always take somebody with me on a study. And I said, well, that's really good. He said, no, he said, you understand. He said, I take someone with me because if I've got someone going with me, I have to go. And I thought, here's the guy that I know that knows more about teaching the gospel to people than anybody that I knew. And he knew the importance of not just going and trying to do it, and he knew that he would not be as consistent as he needed to be unless he had someone that he was accountable to. And so it wasn't just a matter of second trying to teach someone else. It was also the fact that that person held him accountable. I mean, if he had Brother Gary going with him, he had to show up because he'd already invited Brother Gary to go with him. He couldn't find a way out of it. And he said consistency is the hardest thing. Be consistent. Keep on going. The fourth thing that I will mention to you in this area is the importance of interaction with other people. Interaction with other people. I think one of the challenges for a lot of Christians today is that we know so many people who are Christians that sometimes it's hard for us to find people who aren't Christians. We become a cloistered community. We become a closed community if we're not careful. Now, I believe of the importance of having good Christian friends. I believe strongly in, especially when you have children, making sure that the friends that they have are people who love the Lord. But if we don't know some people that aren't Christians, we can't teach people that aren't Christians. I don't know what kind of hobbies you have, but I have, through the years, tried to develop some hobbies in some areas where I have limited interest in order that I could have opportunity to meet people that I did not know. You've got to find people. I love a quote I ran across a number of years ago. It's very simple, very short. And it says this: found people find people. Found people find people. If the Lord has found you, you've been saved, then you need to be looking to find other people. When I was in Hamilton, I coached Little League football and basketball and baseball. And I had two reasons that I did that. One was extremely personal because it gave me an opportunity, an excuse, so to speak, of finding time to spend with my children. I always tried to coach teams that my kids were on. My schedule then allowed for that. The elders didn't mind me coaching Little League ball because it was a community thing. And if my kids were on the team, it gave me an opportunity to be with them more. But the other reason was because it gave me an opportunity to interact with other adults, with parents of these kids. And Cindy's in here, but Kyle's in here. But Kyle played Little League baseball with my younger son Andrew for a number of years. And some of the best contacts I got were through those opportunities of coaching some of those Little League teams where I got to know their parents and be around their parents. Since I've been in Nashville, I've been a part of a historical society. I have no interest in being a part of a historical society that deals with national history necessarily, other than it gave me an opportunity to meet some people that I wouldn't otherwise meet. Try to be involved in some things that force you to be involved with people who aren't Christians. Not so you can in any way adapt their lifestyle, but so that you can get involved in their life. Now, my belief is that the best way to get involved in people's life is through the children. I still believe that. Because people do things for the kids and won't do for anyone else. So I would recommend you do that. You find that opportunity. Number next, I think it's number 5. I want to emphasize when it comes to this whole large area, the importance of prayer. And I don't want to, I really wanted it to be a separate area in and of itself. I would encourage you, as David did last night, to keep a list. I normally keep a list with me of 5 people that I'm trying to study with. And I pray over that list. I pray about those people on that list. Right now, Jody and Jason Morrissey are on that list. Melanie and Seth Mood are on that list. And Melanie Smith on that list. Those are the 5 people right now that I'm praying about. I talked to Jody and Jason about 3 weeks ago and had a study with them, and we'll talk about this in just a couple of minutes. I did not close the study very well, and I'm hoping that they'll be baptized in the next. They told me when I talked to them Saturday a week ago that it would be in the next 2 weeks. The reason I know it didn't close the study well is they weren't ready to be baptized right then. But I still have hope that they're going to be baptized in Christ. And when they're off the list, I've already got another couple in mind that I'm hoping to study with. I try to keep 5 people on the list all the time. And then that does a couple of things for you. One, it keeps those people in front of your mind, so that anytime you're around those people, you're looking for openings, for chances to say something to them about the Lord. The second thing it does is it keeps those people's name before the Lord. And I believe the Lord helps us when we pray about people. I believe He is active in our lives. And I think that that's extremely important, that we keep on praying for people. So keep a list. Several years ago, when my younger son Andrew was a senior in high school, he called me one afternoon about 6 o'clock, and he said, "Dad, can you meet us at the church building? Benny wants to be baptized." And I said, "Great." I said, "Yes, of course I can." So we set it up, the time and everything, headed the building, and a couple of people met us down there, and we baptized Benny Moran, one of his high school friends. And that night, after we had our family devotional, our family meetings, we always call them, Andrew stayed in the room for a few minutes. He said, "Dad, that was number 5. And I said, what do you talk about?" I honestly didn't know. He said, "Well, this year, at the first of the year, he said, last year, at the first of the year, you gave everybody a card, and you asked us to write down names of 5 people that we knew that weren't Christians, and to start praying for them for opportunities to teach them." And he said, "Benny was the 5th one on my list." He said, "Now all 5 of them have been baptized in Christ." Now, I don't want to be mystical about that or anything. I do want to be extremely practical. I believe him having that list made him live different around those kids, made him think different when he was around those guys, made him look for openings and opportunities. So I encourage you to keep a list of people who you know that are not Christian, and to pray for those individuals. All right, number 6, I believe it is, and this gets to the Joe Mill video. Have you known people who go out and they show the old Joe Mill film strips, the videos, and the DVDs, and they are not successful? They'll show them time and time and time again, and they're just not successful. It used to really concern me. You find people, and they were great. They really wanted to study with people. They go out, they just would not be successful. I'd wonder why weren't they? And I wondered that until I heard Zig Ziglar speak a few years ago. And he was talking to a group of salesmen. He wasn't talking to Christians. He was talking to salesmen. And he said the significance of this cannot be overestimated. He says that is, he said, if you want to be successful as a salesman, he said, you get with your company and you find their their canned speeches, and you use their canned speeches. And he said, everybody thinks that you shouldn't use canned speeches because they're tired and they're worn out. He said, but they got to be canned speeches for one reason. That's because they work. And so what I encourage you to do when it comes to the Joe Miller videos is to find a closing method and then use it. Find someone that knows how to close a Bible study. And then you figure out what their method is and use their method. Dad wrote in a book that I'm going to recommend to you called Loving and Leading Men to the Savior. His 5 closes. His closes he uses for his 5 for each of the Joe Miller videos. And I have used them for years and years. And every one serves a specific purpose. And so if you're using the videos, I would encourage you to get that book and to get those closes. They will be helpful to you. Use other people's closes. Number 7. In conducting any study, but especially one like Joe Miller videos or OBS, Open Bible Study, I don't know a way to say this more easily than this, and that is, don't answer a question before it's time. Don't answer a question before it's time. What I have found is that most people, if you can ever get involved in a religious study with them, they have a question that they want to ask. And if you are not very careful in answering their question, you will close an opportunity to teach them the gospel. So So they answer a question before it's time. Now, by that I mean, when you talk about the Joe Miller videos, the third one talks about the church. And if you try to talk about instrumental music, and that's, you know, one of those big questions that we're always asked. If you try to answer that question before it's time, you may never get to show the video, so you may never get to the study. I've had people who have asked me before, just on my first meeting of them, that'll say something like, you know, y'all use music in your worship, but why don't you? You know what the best answer to that question is? I have a set of videos I'd like to show you if you'd be willing to study them with me, and it'll answer that question. If you're not careful, you will answer the question, and you may close the door forever. Which takes me to the next point, number 8, if my list is correct, and that is this. And when you're involved in a study, I think it's extremely important that you keep the big picture in place. Don't let the little picture get in the way of the big picture. The big picture is teaching the gospel to someone. That's your goal. And if we're not careful, we will win a whole lot of little wars, and we'll never win the battle. I'm glad I said that backwards. But you got the point, don't you? I mean, you know, be very careful. You may convince someone, but you may never lead them to the Lord. And if you're not very careful, you'll go around, you'll answer people's questions about, you know, why members of the church of Christ believe those going to heaven, or why don't y'all use your own music, or why don't y'all have women preachers? You may answer all those questions, but you may never lead anybody to the Lord. And I have a bigger goal in mind when someone asks me a Bible question, a bigger goal than the idea of just being able to say to them, all right, you know, here's the answer. I can give them a Bible answer. What I found works is to give them a small answer, and then to come back and say, let me take about 30 seconds to answer your question, but really, I'd like to spend a little bit more time with y'all. And there are people usually will accept that. And number 9, and these two go together. When you're studying with someone, the Joe Millers or whatever method you're using, keep it as simple as possible. Keep it as simple as possible. I studied with Daryl, and I think his wife's name was Heather, years ago, and 25 years ago probably. And Daryl's wife was not a member of the Lord's church. Daryl had grown up in the church. Don't know if he'd ever become a Christian. They were newlyweds. Decided they had an opportunity to study with him. We studied. And we got to baptism, and she was hung up on it. Couldn't get her to see it. And so after I tried to approach her to it, I went to the Greek, and I walked her through the Greek word baptizo and its importance and what it means, the idea of submersion, immersion, the idea of being a plunging and dunking. And she was Methodist in background. She'd been sprinkled as a child, and she couldn't get beyond that. So I took her to Romans 6, and I walked her through all sorts of words and everything else. And when I finished, she said, "Well, you know an awful lot, don't you?" She said, "But I don't know Greek, and I just don't think I understand it well enough to do what you said." And I thought, man, I went home and I cried, and I kicked myself for those 2 or 3 days. I was so upset because I had showed her how smart I was, but I had not convinced her of what the Scripture said. And if we're not careful, we can lead people with the idea that we know a lot about the Bible, or we know a lot about languages, or we know a lot about logic, or whatever that area is. And they can think, man, they're really smart. I wish I was that smart. Keep it extremely simple. And the thing that goes hand in hand with that is develop a mentality that says we are learning together. We're learning together. Flavel Yakeley did a study a number of years ago. People who had taught the gospel to someone else, the person who accepted and become a Christian. And what he concluded was that successful Bible studies, those studies that culminate in a person obeying the gospel, successful Bible studies, the student sees them and the teacher as learning together, as so when you're studying with someone, don't try to take the mentality of, I'm the teacher and I know it all and I've got it figured out and I'm going to tell you everything. We're learning together. We're trying to learn this together. We're trying to learn more about what the Lord's will is for my life. And I love it when a student says, I see this in the text, and I always try to listen in such a way that I hear it in a way I've not heard it before. And I try to say, well, I've not seen that before. And it's, I don't lie about it. But if it's something that they can teach me, it makes the whole process a whole lot easier if they can teach me something. Because then it's not me taking the role of I know more than you know about everything. We're in this process together. We're learning together. So those are just a few things that I've found that have been helpful in general Bible studies and the Joe Miller film strips. What I want to do for the rest of our time, we've got about 10 minutes left, if I'm right, before I need to give you a minute or two for questions, is I want to talk to you about the book, God Speaks Today. Years ago, back in 1969, the old Woodlawn congregation made its first trip to Central America, Belize, Central America. At that time, it was British Honduras. It was the only English-speaking country in the world that did not have a congregation of the Church of Christ. That's how they selected. That's how they selected that place. And so they made the trip there. After several trips, Dad put together a little book called God Speaks Today. And I don't know how many of you have seen this book before. So a few of you have, all of you not. And through the years, Dad refined it a number of times. He, added color to it, but it always was kind of, real simple, real standard, and he used it, he used it in Belize as their Bible study. It's just a real simple 4-part study. There are 4 lessons, and they're very, very simple to understand. And that's one. In fact, at times it's almost simplistic. It's almost a little too simple. If you want to know the truth about the matter, it's a little bit too simple. But Dad always wanted it to look better. He was always concerned that it just kind of looked cheap and not very good. And so a couple of years ago, before Dad died, in fact, one of the last things he did was he took he sent the color copy of it to the publishers. That's one of the very last things that he did. And it actually came out a few months after Dad died, so he never saw the finished product of it. But this is the updated one. It's got very attractive pictures in it, and still the same basic material that he used. Always, every time he produced it, he'd do a couple of things different with it, but it's still the same basic tool that he used then. And I've got copies of this. If any of you want one, when you leave this morning, you just pick one up on your way out when you leave. But for some reason, I don't know why. Maybe it's just kind of our mentality in the United States. But for some reason, the color material is received a whole lot better than the old black and white material was received. I've been using this for the last several months with a great deal of success. It's very simple. It starts with Bible authority, which I believe and Dad believes is always where you start. How God spoke in the past. The second lesson deals with worship and what commands of God we're supposed to obey, and walks you through Noah and the ark, and just simple, nothing fancy. The third section, the third lesson, is on worship and its significance in an individual's life, and then the fourth lesson is on baptism and salvation and how a person becomes a Christian. It's very simple, very easy to use. Now, one of the things I wanted to tell you about today was a friend of mine that some of you may know, some of you may not know, Joy Sparks. Joy is the youth minister of the Midway congregation in Jasper, Alabama, and Joy is a geek. He knows computers real well, okay, and has been real helpful to me in a lot of different ways in different areas. And I asked Joy, I asked a couple of people. Joy was finally one that was willing to help me. A couple of months back, about 3 months back, I guess, we met, and asked him if he would mind taking Dad's material and putting it in a different form. And so what he has done, what he is doing, is taking just the simple material that's in the book and just taking it as it is, and he is making it interactive on the iPad and any kind of reader or device like that. And I did all that stuff. So he's taken it and he's got the first lesson done. We're still working on the process of getting the rest of them done, but it's really well done and a really useful tool for you. It is interactive, and we're still working on the best way to make it interactive. Right now, it's designed in kind of a PowerPoint format, so it may be used on a computer or a Kindle or an iPad or any sort of electronic reader. And what happens when you click on the slide, it just advances to the next section. Hebrews chapter 1, 1 and 2 is where this is emphasized. Study starts, and then God has spoken in various times. That's what Hebrews 1 says. It tells about different ways God spoke, or through Abraham, Moses through the bush, Solomon in a dream, Balaam from a donkey, Belshazzar, the handwriting on the wall, and then finally you get to how does God speak today? And that's basically the first lesson. And at the end of each lesson, in the way that Dad put this together, at the end of each lesson there is a series of questions. We're still, again, working on the best way to make this both one, interactive, and two, extremely easy to use. And the way it's set up now is when you click on the question, it gives you the correct answer. We don't have the ability to, we've not yet figured out how to make it where it gives you if you pick the wrong answer, where it tells you got the wrong answer, it will give you the right answer every time. So I guess that's an area where we still have a little bit of work to do. It does work that way, but it may not be the best way to do it. We just not figure out the best way yet. But that's basically how this is. And again, it's kind of a new tool. And a friend of mine, Michael Hyatt, that lives in Denver, Colorado, and I, along with a guy named Caleb O'Hara that lives in Ripon, California, do a podcast called The Ministry Geek. We talk about technology and ministry and how to use it. And we've been talking some time about there need to be some teaching method through the iPad and iPhones and these readers that people could use to study the gospel with people. And I don't know, it took a while for me to realize that that material will really work well in this sort of format. And so this is, there may be others out there, but I don't know of any other material out there that's this interactive, that's available for Kindle and things like that. If you would like a copy of the first lesson, the file, and that's the biggest issue right now, the file is extremely large, but if you'd like a copy of it, if you will give me your email address, I will send you a link that you can go to and see it, so you don't have to download it, so you don't have to download a 500 megabyte file to your computer. We've got to figure out how to make that smaller. He thinks he can do it through resolution sizes and things like that. That gets into technical stuff that you're not interested in. But if you would like a copy of it and to be able to see what it hopefully will look like, just give me your email address. All right. Well, my time is pretty much gone.